It's been 60 years since the University of Mississippi integrated. 60 years since a young man from Kosciuszko came to the front steps of the Lyceum seeking an education. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, the lessons that young man would teach the university, the state, and the country would far outweigh the formal education offered in return. 60 years ago, James Meredith enrolled here, the University of Mississippi, a school that had long subscribed to the Jim Crow way of life in the South. His mission, twofold: to gain an education and to put an end to segregation and white supremacy in his home state. Hello, my name is Randall Pinkston. In the spring of 2022, I was a visiting professor at the University of Mississippi. I had the privilege of sitting down with Mr. Meredith and members of the University of Mississippi faculty, staff, and students ahead of the 60th anniversary of James Meredith's integration to look at where we have been, where we are, and where we are going. James Howard Meredith was born in Attala County, Mississippi, June 25, 1933, to Moses and Roxy Meredith.
My father was my greatest influence, I think largely by godsend and almost by accident. I was my father's second family. I was my mother's oldest child. So he still had to make a living and do the farm. And I became his helpmate. And for 10 years, he taught me everything he knew. My mother was even a greater influence. I was her oldest child. She created me to be James Meredith.
From a young age, his parents poured lessons into James to create the man who would climb the steps of the Lyceum in 1962. After completing high school, Meredith would enlist in the newly desegregated Air Force.
I didn't do what most people did in the military. I was in 9 years. And my first assignment was Topeka Air Force Base, Kansas, and they opened a new library on that base, a one-room library, smaller than this room. And I started reading not just books, but the biggest issue going was the black thing. This was 3 years before the Brown decision. So Jet and all of the black, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, all of the black newspapers, as well as all the white papers, as well as the Air Force Times and the Army Times, all came to this library. I didn't do what normal people did, so I read everything.
After the military, Meredith returned home to the segregated South, where he would spend 2 years at nearby Jackson State College, and by 1962, he would set his sights on Oxford.
I think what's important to know about James Meredith is that he was one part of a broader social movement. He also was an extremely courageous and bold individual, because when John F. Kennedy was elected president, he wrote Kennedy a letter and said, I followed with interest your election to presidency. I want you to know that I'm very happy about your support of civil rights for black people in America, particularly here in the South. And I wanted to let you know that I will be applying to the University of Mississippi and I'm probably going to need some help.
Their first response, they welcomed me as a new student. They didn't know I was black until I wrote them back and told them, I hope your attitude toward me as a student don't change when you discover I'm not a white applicant. But I ain't never had in mind making Ole Miss look bad. I want Mississippi, Ole Miss to look good at any cost.
He knew that it was going to be a fight, and he knew that he needed an army on his side that was bigger than the White Citizens Council and Ross Barnett and the power structure of Mississippi. And the only army larger than that was the federal government.
On October 1st, 1962, after a day of intense rioting that claimed the lives of 2 people, James Meredith, under the protection of federal marshals, enrolled and began classes. On August 23, 1963, just 10 months later, he would graduate with a degree in political science.
You asked about psychology earlier. That was the biggest part of my reality. If I studied anything, it was lynching. I really believed that if a mob came after me, I could raise my hand and stop it. That's how much I thought I knew about human psychology. And the thing fear come up a lot. If I ever feared anything, I don't know it.
The students who followed Meredith, African-American students who didn't have the U.S. Army, who didn't have the bodyguards, first it was 5, then it was 7, then it was 10 a year, and by the early 1970s it was maybe 100 or 200. They also were risking their lives, and they were also bold and courageous in opening up this university to all citizens, and he started that.
Because I wanted everybody in the world, particularly all blacks in Mississippi, to think Ole Miss was a good place. I mean, because I wanted them to come here.
Change did not happen overnight, but over the last 60 years, the university has taken on the mission and continued the work of James Meredith. That mission and the work being done here today is more prevalent than ever.
It's been really exciting to see how much growth we've had as a university. So when I started 25 years ago, 26 years ago, we had under 40 black faculty members. We didn't have a lot of African American staff working in administrative offices. And so all of us, Dr. Cole, myself, everybody was doing everything, anything related to culture. I mean, I was planning programs, advising the gospel choir, taking people on trips. We had to do it. We all did it. So now to see that we have a center to do it and to see how they're able to really strategically plan to make sure that every member of our university is represented. They feel like they have a voice. If they feel like they have been hurt, they have a place to go to help resolve issues. I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
You know, for a long time, I always made incremental steps. But also, they've been planned steps. They've been steps that have been thoroughly thought out. It's evident, you know, by the fact that we have people coming in, seeing the needs and stepping up to meet those needs as well. And so it's an ongoing process. We are far from a perfect university. We are thriving every day to be that perfect university. And we're going to do the right programming that it takes to make that happen.
is the reason why this institution has had to make good on its promises to the citizens of our state. And I've chosen to give much of my life to the institution. My whole career has been at this institution. And I don't think it would be so if not for that kind of story.
I remember Dr. E.J. Edney as a student working on the strategic plan for this university to make sure that we account for race and deal with that in a more effective way. And then watching him graduate and work as a graduate student and eventually become assistant director of the Center for Inclusion, director, and now assistant to the vice chancellor. It's incredible. I remember Dr. Shambhoda Mead coming here and starting with absolutely nothing. I mean, she just had a budget and didn't even have a space yet, but she had to figure out what it meant. And she made something incredibly passionate and created all these job opportunities for people.
It's been such a pleasure getting to know Mr. Meredith as we've planned for the 60th. He truly loves this university, despite sort of his experiences here that were not pleasant. He still loves this university, and he still thinks that this university, is a great place. His children have come here, his grandchildren have come here. 60 years ago wasn't that long ago, and I think we have lived up to that promise in a lot of ways, but certainly we still have more work to do. I think about my own education has done for me and helped change my trajectory. Like the fact that James Meredith actually came up to my office in the Lyceum, 3rd floor. It was not lost on him nor me. And I've been thinking about it all along when he came up there. I think it meant so much for him to see me in that space physically. He's still a reminder that you can and you can do anything you kind of put your mind to and that you want to do. And just that responsibility, I think, to open doors, right, for future generations.
I know Dr. Cole. I had dinner with James Meredith. I've shook his hand. He's flesh and bone just like me. They have courage. I've got courage. They have time. I've got time. They did something with the breath in their bodies that we can touch and feel and that all of us can benefit from. Why not me?
I consider the black-white issue to be the most important thing in the entire universe. And I have always believed that Mississippi was the place, if there was ever to be a workable new policy, it would come out of Mississippi. The University of Mississippi is the most important thing, not just place, in my life. And thank you. And I'm just glad to be here.
In the end, education at the highest level was transacted. Lessons of life and understanding were exchanged. Why do we go to college in the first place? To find community, to build relationships, to be understood? All of those answers are correct. But perhaps on a deeper subconscious level, we go to college to be uncomfortable, not to be understood, but to find understanding in things foreign to who we were and where we came from. But that's the thing about higher education. James Meredith blurred the lines between teacher and student. He sought an education and to educate, to lay a foundation at the flagship of higher learning in Mississippi, where columns rose skyward and bricks enclosed the way we thought. James Meredith chose the University of Mississippi because the change he would enact would continue long after his degree was conferred. 60 years later, that change has been distilled into one simple message. To the spot that ever calls, all are welcome.